Good evening and welcome to CFP Board's webinar, Managing Your Finances in Uncertain Times, Resources for Federal Government Employees. My name is Erin Coppell. I'm the Managing Director of Government Relations and Public Policy Council here at CFP Board. We know that federal government employees are facing unprecedented uncertainty about their careers. Having the information and confidence to make smart money decisions is more important than ever. CFP Board and Certified Financial Planner professionals are here to help. This webinar will provide you with the tools to make the best financial decisions when separating from service and to manage financial uncertainty while remaining in your current roles. A few housekeeping notes to get us started. If you experience issues with your audio, please check your Zoom and computer audio settings. Exiting and re-entering Zoom can also resolve issues. Please submit any questions you have through the Q&A function in Zoom, and we'll address as many questions as possible as we go, and also pull some to handle live with our panelists. A recording of this webinar will be available on our website, cfp.net, in the days ahead. Just a moment. All right. A brief note about our agenda. After I provide brief introductions to CFP Board and our panelists, Washington Post personal finance columnist Michelle Singletary will provide introductory remarks. Then former CFP Board Chair Karen Schaefer, a certified financial planner professional specializing in holistic financial planning for federal government employees, and Benefits Pro and government executive author Tammy Flanagan will provide you with critical information to navigate these times. After the presentation, we will discuss how you will be able to access a list of CFP professionals who have offered to provide financial planning services to federal government employees pro bono or at a reduced industry rate. First, a note about what is CFP Board. CFP Board is the professional body for personal financial planners in the United States. CFP Board consists of two affiliated nonprofit organizations, both focused on advancing the financial planning profession for the benefit of the public. CFP Board of Standards sets and enforces the requirements for the Certified Financial Planner designation. CFP Board, Center for Financial Planning, advances competent and ethical financial planning and expands CFP professional diversity for the benefit of the public. For 50 years, Certified Financial Planner certification has been the standard of excellence for financial planners. CFP professionals have met extensive training and experience requirements and make a commitment to CFP Board to act as a fiduciary when providing financial advice to a client. This means that CFP professionals have agreed to put your best interests first, ahead of their own. I'd like to introduce our panelists here tonight, starting with Michelle Singletary. Michelle is a personal finance columnist for the Washington Post. Her award-winning column, The Color of Money, is syndicated by the Washington Post News Service and Syndicate and appears twice weekly in newspapers nationwide. Singletary is the author of 4 books and frequently appears on national television, including The Today Show, Good Morning America, CNN, and NPR. For 2 years, she hosted her own national television program, Singletary Says, on TV1. Karen Schaefer, CFP, is a former CFP Board Chair and the managing member and co-founder of Schaefer Financial, a premier financial planning firm in the DC area. With over 40 years of experience, she has built a specialized practice serving federal employees across nearly every federal department and agency, helping them navigate the complexities of federal pension and benefit programs. As a trusted advisor, Karen provides comprehensive financial planning and readiness strategies, ensuring that federal employees make informed decisions about their retirement, benefits, and long-term financial security. Tammy Flanagan is the founder of and principal retirement specialist at Retire Federal. She has been providing retirement planning assistance to federal employees since 1985. She is the Senior Benefits Director for the National Institute of Transition Planning, which has been conducting pre-retirement seminars and workshops since 1987. For almost 20 years, Tammy has authored the popular weekly retirement planning column for Government Executive online magazine. I'm now going to turn it over to Michelle Singletary for a brief introduction. Welcome, Michelle.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. First of all, I'm so honored that you guys asked me to do the welcome. It's such a great organization, and what you're doing right now is so needed. Just thank you for what you're doing for so many people right now. So the first thing I want to say is thank you for joining it live and later as you watch this. But the very first thing I want to do is validate your feelings. This is a tough time for a lot of you, and I know that there's a lot of things going on in your head and your heart. And so I want to just say, that's all okay. Feel what you have to feel. And I know this is all about finances, but your finances is connected to your emotions. And if you don't get a hold of those first, you could make some mistakes in the decisions that you have to make going forward. So feel it, scream, do whatever you have to do. And if you can't handle yourself, please seek the help of a mental health professional. Guess what, y'all? I'm in therapy too for a whole lot of other reasons. So it's okay to get help and to ask for help. I've heard from so many workers. I heard from a worker for the USAID who was so close to qualifying for a pension. And I don't know what to tell her other than we're here to help you. I heard from a Marine veteran who is trying to keep his staff safe and away from cuts. And, I was talking to him for about an hour and I couldn't get a word in edgewise because he just wanted to vent. And you know what I did? I just let him vent. I didn't even ask him a whole bunch of questions. I just let him talk because sometimes that's all you need right now. So as I sort of wrap up my opening comments, I do want to talk to you about a strategy that I've used in my life. I use it with the ministry that I run in my church. It's called the 5 S's. For times like this, you kind of need a little program, right? And so the first S is stop. It's okay to stop any financial decisions that you have to take right now. It's okay to stop and take care of your mental health. And the other S is slow down. You will feel like you have to make a whole bunch of decisions right now. And guess what? The scammers out there probably sending you emails and text messages. So you want to just slow down. There's some things that you might have to take care of right away. But for the most part, just breathe and take a pause. And then start. Listen, I don't know if you've lost your job. You might be here thinking, I just want to get this information just in case, or maybe you have lost your job. But either way, start going through your budget like you have never done before. If you are already a good budget manager, go over it again. Just start doing what you need to do to collect yourself financially. And then suspend. Pause any actions that may not be in your best interest. There are a lot of people that are going to tell you, you have to do this, you got to do that. You might just need to say, I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to suspend making a decision until I get good information, which is what you're going to get tonight. So you can just wait and maybe meet with someone from a CFP person until you can decide what's right for you. And then sustain the relationships that are going to get you through this, right? This is not all just about money, right? There may be family members and friends, and maybe you don't really want to talk to anybody, but you got to sustain those relationships so that you can get through this tough time. So those are 5: stop, slow down, start, suspend, and sustain. And finally, I want to just say, I'm here for you. You can email me, you can write me. Not all your stories will end up in my column, nor do they have to be. But I'm here to let you know what you might need to do. I've been doing it in my column. If you want to tell your stories or you just want to vent, You can email me at the post. I hope you are following my columns. I am trying to follow all of that's going on and give you the best advice that I can as information comes to me. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for taking this step to get the information that you need to make the right decisions for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was really powerful. We really appreciate you being here and for everything you've been doing to raise awareness about this very important issue. I'm going to turn over the mic, so to speak, now to Tammy Flanagan and Karen Schaefer, who are the main event here tonight. And Tammy and Karen, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michelle, for that. That was an inspiring moment. I'm taking a deep breath myself, as you can imagine. There's just so much going on right now, and it's terrifying people. And terror is a real feeling, but it might lead you, as Michelle said, to a bad decision. So what we want to do tonight is walk you through some real information that you can now take and empower yourself to make a better decision. Not all the decisions are going to be what you may have planned, but this is the best thing I've learned about financial planning. We can always make a situation better. There's no magic wands. I've been looking, no magic wands. But the fact of the matter is just being able to have real information is what it's going to take for you to actually have the confidence that you're doing your best. And if you do your best, you are much more likely to land on your feet than if we stay in that panic mode or that frustrated mode or those all real emotions that we are. We're humans, right? That's what we have. I just want to share with you, though, that I am just thrilled that I'm working with Tammy Flanagan because she is the go-to person when it comes to your benefits. And so what we're going to do just to get through this, we're going to try and answer as many questions as we can behind the scenes. I've invited Brandon Keir from my firm, a certified financial planner, also retired vet, and he is ready to go and excited about being able to get you out of a guessing game, as well as Caitlin Yardley, another certified financial planning professional who has decades of experience, mostly with federal government employees. So they're going to be furiously answering the financial planning questions that are coming in. And then Michelle Bollier is another colleague of Tammy's who is a great resource, and she'll be answering the questions that come in that are much more focused on just your benefits, right? And then we're leaving time, we hope, at the end so we can answer a few questions. Tammy and I often answer the same question with a little different emphasis, right? So she'll have the technical, this is what your benefits allow, and I have and this is what financial planning principles would say you should do with that. So initially, I think, Tammy, you're on. I'll let you walk through the first set of slides here, and I'll jump in if I see something that I need, and then the financial planning slides follow.
Sounds good, Karen. Thanks so much. And
Sure.
as you can see from this agenda we have here, we've got a pretty ambitious agenda for the next hour and a half, 45 minutes or so. But we are leaving time for your questions. So we're going to get through these nuts and bolts as quickly as we can, but I want to take it slow enough that they make sense, because I know sometimes this stuff is the first time you've heard it. I know there's a lot of employees I've been talking to that hadn't given second thought to retirement, because after all, they're still 10 years away from regular retirement, as we call it. And now all of a sudden they're being pushed into a decision of leaving federal service a lot sooner, perhaps, than they had planned. So I know there's a lot of angst, a lot of stress along with this. So I appreciate Michelle's comments that she made on that softer side of all of this decision making, because I know it is a stressful time for many, many federal employees, and lots of them. Karen and I have both been talking to a lot of you over the past months that this has all been going on. So what I want to start off with, because I know you're hearing a lot of jargon going around, and I know a friend of mine called Social Security the other day, and he said, could you just explain to me what they said, because they were talking in acronyms. So I want to make sure that you understand the differences in the types of retirement you have available, because all along you're eligible for retirement when you meet a specific amount of service and you're a certain age. That's when you can just choose to retire. And we call that being eligible for an immediate retirement. So you're going to hear the terms immediate retirement versus deferred retirement. So all the things I'm going to show you on this slide would be considered a retirement that within the next 30 days, you're eligible to start receiving benefits. So when we say immediate, that just means you are today eligible for retirement. So normal retirement or regular retirement, the thing people put on their computers with the countdown clock when they're hoping on day one of federal service, they got another 30 years to go. And so, retirement is an exciting time in many cases. It's a time when you want to do things you've always wanted to do and clean those closets and do that travel and spend time with grandchildren. And that's when you reach these age and service requirements. So the first thing is, MRA with 30 years. So these are for the folks who come in right out of school, right out of college, out of high school, and they spend their entire career as a federal civil servant. So by the time they reach that MRA, which stands for minimum retirement age, and if you don't know what that is, at the bottom of this slide, it says if you were born in 1970 or later, your MRA is 57, because that's the age that's now being phased in for retirement. But if you were born between 1953 and 64, which I'm a member of that baby boom generation, and that would be 56 and so on. So most of you probably know this by now, but if you don't, you can find this information at opm.gov. Now, some people come into federal service a little later in life, so when they reach age 60, the service requirement goes down to 20 years, and then they become eligible to retire, even though they don't have 30 years. And then finally, if you come in even later in life and at age 62, you don't have 20 years, but you have more than 5, then you can retire as well. And none of this requires any special authority. If you had happened to sign up for the deferred resignation back in January and you're already at this level, you know that you're going to be eligible for retirement as soon as you decide to fill out that application and turn it in and put the date on it. So I consider this group of employees who fall into this category very fortunate right now, because at least you have that choice to collect that immediate benefit if you decide to pull the plug and leave your federal career. Now, also an immediate retirement could be somebody who reaches their MRA and doesn't have 30 years, but they have 10, 15, 20 years. But this is called a reduced benefit because your age is going to factor into that benefit. So if you were just at your MRA at age 57, for example, and they're going to calculate that age reduction for how far you're under age 62. So it's a 5% penalty for every year under 62. So that's a pretty massive penalty for someone to take advantage of that. So of course, in normal times, you can say, well, yes, I'll do that because my main focus is getting health insurance and I want to go do something else. Or you might say, I'm going to keep working and not even worry about this option. Or you could resign with entitlement to this immediate benefit, but postpone applying for it, thereby avoiding that age penalty, or at least some of it, by delaying your application. So that's another option. We call that an MRA plus 10 retirement. Then we get to what we're talking about this year so much. These acronyms, Vera, DSR, RIF, this is all being thrown about a lot these days, unfortunately, and people are thinking about retirement, like I said, who had never thought about it recently. So let me tell you a couple of these acronyms. Vera stands for Voluntary Early Retirement Authority, and a lot of agencies that I've been talking to the employees are offering that right now in some cases. And it comes about kind of suddenly. You'll get a notice saying, hey, we're going to have a voluntary early retirement. Anybody who's 50 with 20 years of service, any age, if you have 25 years of service, you can put in your application. They're going to give you a deadline when those applications have to be submitted. And then there's going to be a deadline also for when you have to be off the payroll. But it's voluntary, meaning you can say, no, thanks. I'm going to hang on there. I'm going to hang on with my fingernails and try to keep my job until I'm told I have to go. So Vera, or voluntary early retirement, is voluntary in the fact that you can choose not to take it, but it does have that last word, authority, meaning that unless you're given this option, it's not an option for you. So then you go back to the regular requirements that I just mentioned. Now, that acronym DSR stands for Discontinued Service Retirement. This is when we're facing the pink slip, like they say in the private sector. When they say, guess what, your job is ending. I've heard some people say they've gotten the notice, it's ending that same day that they got the notice, which is very unfortunate. But generally, it's going to be with a notice of 30 days, 60 days. You're going to get some notice ahead of time. And it is required by regulation you get that notice that you're going to be facing a separation that's involuntary. And it can be for a major RIF, a reorganization, downsizing, all the things that you've been hearing about in the news and from your agency in these last few months. That's the same age and service requirements, but in this case, it's not voluntary, it's involuntary. So you're losing your job, you got to start thinking about what comes next. Now, when you hear major RIF, that's going to be associated with this discontinued service retirement. When you hear the acronym VSIP or buyout or voluntary separation incentive payment, that's going to be associated with Vera, the voluntary. That usually comes first before the DSR, but they both have the same age and service requirements. So if you're eligible for one as far as how old you are and your service amount, you'd be eligible for the other one as far as a retirement benefit. And it is an immediate benefit so that once you put that date on the application, let's say you're going to go out on a Vera on June 30th, your first retirement check would be for the month of July. You may not get it in July. It's going to take a while to process that application, but it'll be backdated to July. Now, we're not going to spend too much time today talking about special provisions, as they're called, for law enforcement officers, firefighters, air traffic controllers. But I do want to say one thing, because I've been getting this question a lot. I'll hear from, let's say, a law enforcement officer who has 18 years as a federal investigator, not quite 20, and they have to have 20 in a covered position to qualify for this special retirement. But they have other government service. They might have come in as a clerk in a support position, then went through agent training, and then became a federal investigator. So they have the 20 years, they're 50 years old, or they're any age, they might have 25 years. They can still apply for Vera, or they can still get retirement under a DSR, but without the 20 years in that special covered position, they're not going to qualify for the more generous calculation. So that's one thing to be really aware of, because the 20 years is a requirement to get that higher factor in the calculation of your benefit. Now, another one we're not going to spend a lot of time on today because of constraints of time is disability retirement. Any age, 18 months of service is all you have to have. This is driven by your disability. Is it an illness that's preventing you from working? Is it an injury that you had outside of work? This is the government's form of long-term disability insurance, but we don't have that. We have disability retirement. So that's what that is. And some of you might be facing that, unfortunately, as well. So I told Karen, I said, I'm going to give her a little quiz because I gave you all these different types of retirement. I want to give everyone a chance to think about where they fit with this. So let me just run through 4 quick examples. So Karen, the first example, we got a 45-year-old employee. She has 25 years in government service right now. Would she be eligible for any retirement benefit?
She would. She'd be eligible for the Vera or the discontinued service retirement because of the 25 years.
Absolutely.
Right?
So she's at least in good shape on that account. You got number 1 right. Let's see if we can go for a home run. So the second one, we've got this guy with 59 years of age. So he's got his MRA, right? He's got that down, but he's only got 18 years of service. So what's he eligible for?
Yeah, so it's not great, but he can take that reduced MRA plus 10. He's got at least a 10. Okay.
Yep.
So it's reduced, but you'll see it's better than nothing, and it may be the door to a happy different career. So
that's right. And the other nice thing, he might get his health insurance, if he has the requirements for that, and that could be a real important benefit as well. Okay, next to the last one is 65-year-old, has only 8 years of service. They came in, after a career, maybe in the private sector, military service. So are they entitled to any immediate benefit?
Sure, because they've made it, they only would have needed 5 years at that age to get a retirement. And we do see that. We see people doing full careers and then coming into the government for just a few years. They get their health insurance and retire. So yeah, that one's I knew that one.
Yep, good. Okay, last but not least, 52-year-olds got 22 years of service, was not going to retire for at least another 5 years, but are they eligible for Vera?
They are, because they get that 50-20. They made the cut there. Yeah.
Look at that. You got 100% on your quiz. And I had no doubt. Karen and I have worked together for many, many years, and we kind of bounce off of each other when we do get the opportunity and the pleasure of working together. So I was excited when I was asked to do this with her. Okay, I want to run through just a real quick example of how much money you're going to get, because Karen's going to start talking about money pretty soon and taxes and all those things. So we got to figure out, how much is this basic retirement, this government pension, this FERS annuity? That's the other thing that's confusing. It goes by so many different names, but this is the part that's administered by the Office of Personnel Management. When you file that application for FERS retirement, this is how that benefit is typically computed. So I've set up an example here with a high 3 average salary. This is the average of your highest 3 consecutive years of pay rates, typically your last 3 years. It does include locality pay. So that locality adjustment is part of your basic pay that's used to compute your high 3. It doesn't include bonuses, cash awards, any overtime pay you might have received, but it does include that basic pay with locality. And for those special groups, it would include their law enforcement availability pay, in case we got any of those folks listening. Then the second factor is your length of service. So for this example, I said, okay, we got somebody with 25 years and 6 months. That could be 5 years of military service, 20 years of civilian service, and 6 months of sick leave. All of that is potentially creditable. So you want to make sure you understand what service you have and what counts. Does any of it require a buyback or a deposit like military service? Make sure you take care of all of that. I heard of an unfortunate situation today where an employee retired who didn't buy back their military service. And because of that, they weren't eligible for an immediate retirement. They were only eligible for MRA plus 10. And they were so upset to find out that their retirement was going to be reduced by 25% because they didn't quite have enough service to meet the unreduced value. So make sure if you have to buy back military service, do that before you leave. Not leave tonight, but leave the government. The calculation is 1%. So who can't multiply by 1%? You don't need fancy software for this. So as long as you have an idea of your high 3 average salary, which is a little less than your final pay rate in most cases, you know how long you've been a federal employee, you know how much sick leave you have on the books. So this calculation, as you can see, I'm showing you this is like 3rd grade math. I had my grandson here, I'm visiting him, and he could do this problem, I think, pretty easily. So we've got this basic benefit of $25,500 a year for this particular example, and that boils down to $21.25 a month. And you might look at that and say, well, gee whiz, they're making $100,000. How are they going to live on this? Well, you're not expected to live on this, because in addition to this, you probably have money in your TSP account you've been investing and saving. You might be old enough for Social Security retirement, or you might be eligible for a FERS supplement. And that supplement is going to take the place of Social Security under both Vera, DSR, regular retirement for anybody who's eligible for an immediate retirement, like I was showing you on the last slide, with the Vera opportunity, 20 years at 50, any age with 25, or just the regular retirement with 30 years at MRA or 60 with 20. You're going to get that supplement. Now for a Vera and DSR, that supplement doesn't kick in until you reach the MRA. So if you're 45 years old with 25 years of service, you're going to be waiting 12 years before that supplement becomes part of this benefit. So some of you who take advantage of this or who are fortunately eligible for this retirement may be still looking for a second career. This may not be enough to live on. Face it, you're probably 10 years away from planning your retirement on normal circumstances. Now that 1.1% factor on the second example below that first one, that would be for you if you're going to retire at the age of 62 or later. You have to be 62 when you leave. You can't take a deferred retirement for that, but you have to be 62. And then you have to also have 20 years of service, not just the 5 that makes you eligible, but to get this higher factor in the calculation, you've got to have 20 years under your belt. And some of that could be military, some of it could be sick leave, but you got to have 20 years total. Now, with this type of a retirement, this immediate retirement, the good news is most of you will get to keep your insurance. That includes federal health benefits, federal group life insurance. Those 2 benefits do require that you've been enrolled in those programs for 5 years immediately preceding your retirement to keep those. Now, you also can keep your FedVIP, dental and vision, your long-term care insurance. Those do not have a 5-year requirement, so those much more easily will follow you into retirement.
And don't you find, Tammy, that surprises some people, the 5-year rule?
It does.
Right. So
it does, and there's a lot of confusion about it too.
Right. I just want to put that in bold.
Absolutely.
The 5-year requirement.
Yeah, and the good news is it doesn't mean you've been in the same plan for 5 years. You could have switched from Blue Cross to GEHA to Aetna, and you still have 5 years in the umbrella of FEHB. It's only when you're in a non-federal health plan, like private sector under your spouse, or maybe a marketplace for whatever reason. But most federal employees do meet this requirement, fortunately. So that's good news. Cost of living adjustments are an important part of our government retirement benefit, but under an early retirement, whether it's DSR or Vera, the COLAs don't start coming until you're 62. And that's even true under regular optional retirement. So anyone who's retiring younger than the age of 62, that benefit's going to be a level payment until after your 62nd birthday. Then you'll start getting annual cost of living adjustments. And we do call them diet COLAs a little bit facetiously, but that's because some years they're 1% less than everybody else is getting from Social Security or civil service or military. FERS gets oftentimes 1% less depending on how high the rate of inflation is. All right, and then like I said, that supplement might be payable depending on if you qualify for that immediate unreduced benefit. And then of course, that's your MRA for the Vera and DSR. Now, that's not the end of the story on this FERS retirement benefit. That's the gross amount of your annuity. That gross amount can be reduced, and these things reduce the gross amount by a number of things. We've already talked about the MRA plus 10 age reduction. The good news is for FERS employees under Vera and DSR, there is no age reduction. So if you're 50 with 20 years or any age with 25 years, you're not going to suffer an age penalty, because you're offered the Vera, you're eligible for it. You'll get the 20% of your high 3 or the 25%, whatever it is based on your length of service. The age reduction only applied to the older civil service system for that type of retirement. Some of you are going to have survivor benefits to provide for a spouse, maybe even a former spouse because of a court order. There's also some other benefits you could be leaving for, perhaps you care for your sibling. So you can elect survivor benefits, but those are going to cause a reduction to your retirement, typically around 10%. So that takes right off the top. If you ever worked part-time as your work schedule in the government, there's going to be a proration of that in the retirement calculation. So in other words, if you work 30 years, 20 hours a week, you worked half of a full-time career, your retirement would be half. But of course, most of you didn't have any part-time service, and if you did, it was probably not your whole career. Alternative annuity, if you have a serious life-threatening illness at the time of your regular retirement, not disability, but just a regular retirement like we've just talked about, you can take out your contributions in exchange for a reduced retirement benefit. It would cause a reduction actuarially based on your age and how much money is in the retirement system, but it's an option for someone who might have a limited life expectancy at the time they retire. The last 2 reductions would apply only to people under the old civil service system, where they might owe some money to the retirement fund, which can cause a reduction, meaning they still get credit for it, but the time does cause a little reduction. And then we have CSRS offset employees, and there might be some of you listening tonight. So if you're over 62 or when you reach age 62, that civil service benefit gets reduced by the Social Security piece of your retirement that you've been paying into during your offset years. And again, I wish I had, 3 hours to explain all of that in great detail, because I know that's a lot. And I don't mean to make your head start spinning, but just be aware that there are some things that can reduce that benefit. And as you saw, even the gross amount wasn't a whole lot of money, even for somebody who has 25 years of service. Now, this is where we're getting into Karen's wheelhouse with tax withholding. We do have to pay tax on these benefits, right, Karen?
That's it. As a matter of fact, that's right. And we do like people to have it withheld so they don't get surprised in April. That's never fun.
Right. That's right. And the state income tax, if you live in a state like in the DMV, Maryland, Virginia, the district, you will pay state income tax as well on your retirement. Now, I moved to Florida. I got out of Dodge, so we don't have a state income tax down here. But in the many areas, you will pay state tax as well as federal tax. That state tax withholding won't start until you elect it after you've retired. So be aware that that's not being withheld while you're in that interim processing period. Okay, the other withholdings would be your insurance. FedVIP, FEGLI, FEHB, all those alphabet soups of your dental, vision, long-term care, health, and life insurance. Okay, so if you don't meet the requirements for an immediate retirement, there's still hope. There's a deferred retirement. So for anybody who has at least 5 years of civilian federal service, you have entitlement to at least a deferred retirement, if not immediate. Now, I'm going to give you an example of a deferred retirement here in this little box on the right side. So here's someone who may have taken that deferred resignation. On the date they're leaving government service, they're age 50, but they don't have 20 years. They only have 18. So they're not qualified for Vera. They're 2 years short, but they can collect a deferred retirement either at their MRA or they can wait until they're 62. Now, if they take it at 62, of course, they're going to be waiting 12 years, but they'll get the full value of what that retirement would have on the day they left on September of 2025. So if they had 18 years of service times the 1% factor times their high 3, I'm just using 100,000 because it's easy to multiply by, they would have a benefit waiting for them of 18,000 a year every year for the rest of their life. Of course, subject to any of those reductions we talked about. Now, the reduced benefit is payable when they reach their MRA, but remember it's 5% for every year under 62, so that 18,000 drops down to 13,500, but they'll collect it for another 5 years that they wouldn't have had they waited. So they have to weigh out the options. But keep in mind, this type of retirement does not include health benefits or life insurance or those wonderful benefits that a lot of people really cherish in retirement. So be aware that the money will be there, but not the insurance benefits. So just to review, Vera, or Voluntary Early Retirement Authority, 50 with 20 years, any age with 25 years, you got to have at least 5 years of civilian service. And then it has to have that authority. You have to get the notice saying you're being offered Vera, and then you apply for it by filling out the FERS or civil service retirement application. That application is what gets the process of retirement started. Just because you got the notice and just because you accepted the fact that maybe there's a VSIP or a buyout, that doesn't mean you've applied for retirement. So don't forget to fill out the application once you've accepted that opportunity. And speaking of buyout or VSIP, there's another acronym for us: Voluntary Separation Incentive Payment. Leave it to the government to come up with that name for what other people might call a buyout payment. This is where the government's saying, hey, we're going to give you some extra money to help you make this decision to leave and accomplish the downsizing that's trying to happen this year. So if you're fortunate, you might get a Vera with a VSIP. This always goes hand in hand with voluntary early retirement. If you get to the point where it's a discontinued service, there's not going to be a buyout because you're going anyway. But under a Vera, under a voluntary early retirement, sometimes you'll have a VSIP, not always, but if it's there, you'll be notified. That VSIP is typically capped at 25,000, although I have heard some agencies like SEC, DOD, who sometimes are offering up to 50,000. So I know even 50,000 in terms of a buyout, and the private sector would probably laugh at this because I've seen people with $1 million buyouts in the private industry, but this is enough to maybe help you transition into retirement, give you some money to help you, tide you over while you're waiting for everything to fall into place, maybe take a nice vacation with what's left after taxes, but don't get too excited because 25,000, as we all know, doesn't last all that long, but at least it's something. And it's based on the severance allowance. So for some people who are younger with not much service, you're not going to get the full 25,000. And let me show you an example of that. In fact, 3 examples here. We got a 35-year-old on the first row with 10 years of service, and they're going to take the early retirement. They took the deferred resignation. Maybe their agency is offering a VSIP. You don't necessarily have to be eligible to retire to take the VSIP. You can still apply for that. But that payment for this person would only be 20,000 because they would get 1 week's salary for the first 10 years of service. They don't get an age bump because they're not over age 40. Now, the second one, this person is over age 40, they're 45. So they not only get 10 weeks of salary, but they get a bump for their age. And I have a link at the bottom of this slide because OPM has this worksheet. So if you wanted to try to figure this out for yourself, pretty easy to follow it step by step. I think there's 9 steps in the process, but again, pretty simple math. And then finally, a 40-year-old with only 15 years of service, again, applying just for the VSIP, they're not eligible for early retirement, but they would get the full 25,000 because they've got 15 years of service, 10 weeks for the first 10 years, 10 weeks for the second 5 years. That gives them the whole 25,000. So even though their severance would have been 40,000, notice that the VSIP is capped at 25,000. Now, for some of you who might be going out in this situation where it's involuntary, let's say you're that 45-year-old with 10 years and you're being let go, right? That's happening these days. That person could apply for the severance allowance, and that would be the 28,500. You might not be getting the VSIP, but you might be getting severance pay from your payroll provider. That's who provides the severance pay. It is subject to tax and it's paid weekly. So you'll get that on a year, up to a year's pay, depending on how much you qualify for. All right, Karen, what do we do? We're being offered Vera, maybe with a VSIP, maybe without.
Yeah, how do we figure that out? And
what do we do?
So we've been through this before. There've been these Veras and discontinued service seasons in federal government. We'd never seen it across the board so much. And so we've been able to analyze it quite a bit. And it's Tammy sort of hinted, none of these offers are valuable enough for you to give up your job. But if you really think your job isn't going to be there, and or if you're pretty employable, you know, you might need to take a break and let off a little steam for what just happened to you, but you've got a skill set that the private sector is going to be looking for, and you're pretty employable, then of course you kind of hold your hand out and say thanks, right? But these numbers are really pretty small for to be compensating for you for giving up your job. And so really, from a financial planning point of view, the only person who really benefits from these are the people who were doing pretty good financial planning all along and were pretty financially secure and most likely closer to the end of their career than the beginning.
Exactly.
Which is rough, right? It's just rough.
Very rough. Yeah. Yeah, so many people, we've been talking to, you and I both, Karen, who really hadn't given much thought to retirement because a lot of people are under the impression we don't start planning until we're 5 years out. And if you're in your 30s or 20s, it's kind of hard to be thinking about what do I do next when I had planned on this being my career. And we still have a lot of career civil servants who really meant for this to be their lifelong career. So that is being upended for many of you. And I know that is very unsettling. So if you pass up the Vera, it's not guaranteed that there's going to be a DSR. Your agency or your position might be one that's not being downsized. Maybe it's one that they still need. They still need government employees, right? We're not giving up on federal service. But like we said, you know, it's massive downsizing that we've never seen the likes of before. So there are a lot of you who will face an involuntary separation. And again, like I said, to get the retirement benefit, you'd have to meet these age and service requirements of being at least 50 with 20 years of service, or any age if you have 25 years. That's going to get you the pension benefit. If you have less than that, you might be eligible for that deferred retirement at a later date. Or if you're already 57 with 35 years, then you don't even need this special authority. You can retire even if this wasn't offered. So that's, like I said, that's a good position to be in, because like Karen said, you might have already been doing your planning and making sure your ducks are in a row. So just take your time. Like Michelle said earlier, take a deep breath. You have a little bit of time to think this through, and don't do anything too quickly. And if you have questions, by all means, find the answer to those questions. I hate to see someone make a big mistake, and once you're off the payroll, it's really hard to come back in. Check with your HR office. I know they're swamped. I really sympathize with anybody who's in HR today, especially as a retirement specialist. Everybody in that agency probably wants information, but be patient with them. Use any kind of email system they have set up. You may have a platform called GRB Navigator or FHR Navigator or GRB platform that lets you kind of do it yourself with these calculations. Make use of that. Your payroll provider may have sent you an annual statement showing you what you're eligible for. Those are okay. They're not down to the penny accurate. They may not be accurate with your length of service, but at least it gives you some idea of where you stand. So any kind of resource you have, take advantage of it. Any training opportunities you have, like you're doing tonight, take advantage of those, because you can't learn too much of this. Karen and I have been doing this for going on 40 years or so, and we still learn something new every day. I mean, it's just that.
And this is just a real important message, that you will get better help from an HR person, from a benefits specialist, from a certified financial planning professional, if you have more information. If the first meeting is just, what am I going to do? Well, what are your options? And then you don't know. Well, we don't know either. And we're going to now have to backtrack and see, okay, what retirement are you eligible for? What kind of years of service do you have? What system are you really in? So the more you can say, all right, I don't know what's best for me or what this really means, but I do know this is the line I'm in. Everybody's swamped. You're the person who's going to be able to get a real answer, because you're asking a very focused question.
Yeah, one exercise people can do, even if you don't know what's happening yet and you haven't been given any offers, find out how to go into your electronic official personnel folder. I still meet people who don't even know what that is. If you don't know what it is, go on your agency's website, whether it's Employee Express or MyPay or whatever the system is they use, there should be instructions on there about how to access your personnel file. And while you're in there, learn how to download it, because once you leave the agency, you're going to lose access to it. And you never know when some of those records are going to be needed, whether it's a beneficiary form, whether it's proving that you've had 5 years of health benefits, whether it's showing the day you left an agency, the day you came back to the next agency, what retirement coverage you had, what work schedule you had. All of those records are important. That's why they're saved. That's why they're in there.
Right.
And so if you did keep copies all along, make copies of it now.
Yeah, really, really important, because you'll download it and you won't necessarily know just how important all that data is, but a planner or a benefit specialist will know. So everybody's going to do that tonight when we're done.
That's right. That's your homework assignment, one of them. Okay. All right, Karen, let's talk some more about planning, and let's bring in the TSP to this discussion and other.
Okay, so we know, you can go to the next slide there. You know that in addition to this pension that many of you will be eligible for, if not immediately, on a deferred basis, and some of you are going to keep your jobs and you'll be eligible for eventually. You also have something very akin to a 401k in private industry or thrift savings plan. And it basically has 5 investment choices for you. One is sort of like cash or cash equivalents, that G fund. It's like leaving your money in a savings account. You get a little bit of interest, but by the time you subtract what inflation did, we don't get growth in the G fund. You've also got a bond fund opportunity. It's called the F fund. I would have called that the B fund, but it's because when you buy a bond, what you're really doing is lending your money to a corporation or the government in exchange for guaranteed, predictable, fixed, there's the F, income back. And in this particular bond opportunity, what you're really following is just a formula of bonds, the Bloomberg Barclay aggregate US bond market. Nobody's sitting at the thrift board picking which is a good bond to buy today. It's the same bonds that anybody owns anywhere who's following this particular formula, Bloomberg Barclays aggregate US bond market, and it has short-term, long-term, and intermediate term bonds. And that all that means is that interest gets paid every month, and then your money comes back on the maturity date. Now, bonds are going to make a lot of sense if your investment objective is income, but if you need real growth, you need to be in stocks. And you have three choices for stocks. One would be the C fund, large U.S. company stocks. If you have any money in the C fund, you have exactly the same stocks as I might have in my 401k plan that has an S&P 500 fund. It's exactly the same formula. Now, when you're in stocks, unlike bonds, we don't get guarantees, right? So with the stocks, the only way you're going to make money is if the company that you now own a piece of, you didn't lend your money, you own a piece of that company, goes up in value, or certainly is getting the perception of going up in value, right? And the stocks are the only ones that have consistently, over time, given us real growth. Like we've been able to sell at a price in the future that's so much greater than what we put in, we actually got our money back and kept pace with inflation and made some growth there, right? But it's definitely up and down in a pretty volatile way. You have large US company stocks in the C fund. You have smaller, all the other stocks in the S fund. It's called the completion index, where if you didn't make it into the S&P 500, you're a smaller company. You're in the you'd be invested in that in the S fund. And then you also have an opportunity to invest in stocks outside the US. And that formula has just been improved tremendously as of last year. So instead of just investing in 20 countries and large stocks, now you're invested, if you're in the I fund, you didn't have to do anything, but now you're invested in some small companies, some big companies, some large companies in pretty much every country outside the United States, except China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and countries that we don't recognize, sort of those terrorist nations kind of places. So you decide how much you want to put into each of those. And from a financial planning point of view, we keep it pretty simple. We know that past performance is no guarantee of future performance, but if since 1871, stocks have outperformed bonds, which have outperformed cash, we have a little pattern there that gives us the confidence that it looks like I have that opportunity as well going forward. And we keep, you either will keep money that you need for the short term out of the market and get long-term money in the market, or hedge that a little bit when we're in uncertainty. Maybe I do need a little bit more cash. But the first thing you have to do is get money in there. And then the second thing you have to do is decide which of these investments are appropriate for you, and then revisit that in a big life event. And maybe losing your job, that's a big life event. So you'll do some combination of these, or on the next slide, you might choose an L fund. All the L funds do is come up with a portfolio using those G, F, C, S, and I choices. But instead of looking at your goals and your temperament, they're just sort of put together based on a point in the future when you're not going to need or want growth anymore. There are 10 of them. and they were designed for you to just pick one, and 9 out of the 10 are named for a year. So we now have the 2070 fund, 65, you see them all the way through to the L income fund. And even though we know that the future's foggy, right? I don't know what's happening tomorrow. We still know that if you do want to have a retirement that where you don't have to worry about money, we need to get money working and we need to keep it working. So what's nice about these L funds is that you don't have to decide how much I'm putting into this one or that one and then rebalance it all the time because they rebalance for you. So if I never rebalanced an account, guess what happens? If I had some cash like the G fund and I had some bonds like the F fund and I had some stocks and I did that a third. Over time, I would have more and more stocks. I'd start to be 50% stocks, maybe 60% stocks, and less of the other two because of this pattern of stocks outperforming bonds, bonds outperforming cash. And the problem with that is I'm getting more aggressive when I'm also getting older and closer to wanting to spend my money. So people who don't like to rebalance or don't like to think about this, or people who are now going into retirement might want to think about an L fund, even if you never have before, because the L funds don't drift. They, instead of getting more aggressive over time, they are systematically moving slowly but surely out of stock and into cash. So if I had all my money in the 2040 fund and Tammy had all her money in the 2050 fund and we never changed our minds, change our minds tomorrow, but we never did. We're both going to end up with exactly the same allocation in these 5 different funds. I'm just getting there 10 years before she does. Right. So we want to just know that these L funds are an alternative to you deciding how much in G, how much in F, how much in C, S, and or I, and having to revisit that and rebalance that. And these 10 alternatives to that really were designed for you to pick one. It's true, you can have more, right? And you can have, I'm going to have a little bit of this 20 whatever fund and then a little extra C fund on the side, but we're really watering down the benefits of having an L fund. They're professionally designed portfolios. Now, one of the things that I did want to mention, though, when we're talking about your thrift plan and your choices, you also have a choice on the next slide about whether or not you want your contribution to be in just regular old thrift savings plan or in the Roth portion of the thrift savings plan. When it wasn't offered when some of you were hired, if you've been around for 20 years or more, but we're not talking about different investment choices. We're not talking about additional money. Some of you know how much you're allowed to put into thrift each year. That you're dividing that, if you want, between traditional and Roth. You're not doubling down on that. But they're quite different one to the next, and you want to understand that. And those of you who are still here next year, there are some pretty big deal changes coming your way when it comes to this Roth opportunity. You will be able to convert traditional money into Roth money. Right now you can't. Your agency match went into traditional, your contribution, unless you elected not to, went into traditional, and up until now, it's stayed in traditional. Well, you can elect to change it into the Roth account next year. And if you're over 50 and doing those extra amounts, we call the catch-up amounts, but it just means smart move for people of a certain middle age. If you can put more in, you put more in, right? That will automatically now be going into Roth. Okay, so what's the big deal difference? On the next slide, I can show you. If I put money...
Before we go to the next slide, I just wanted to ask you, because so many people are retiring this year, when that takes effect next year to allow in-plan conversions, can people who have already left federal service do that?
Sure. When you it would be the same as if you've left your thrift savings plan, you retired 10 years ago, can you now move it to an IRA? Can you continue to change your investment choices? Right.
Good.
So yeah, it's going to be an option that people have. Oh, I didn't want to go to,
Oh,
I
not
need
this one?
another, let's go back. Yeah. We pared it down so much. So here's the big deal difference that you really have to understand. When you're putting a contribution into the part of your contribution into Roth, you're paying taxes on that now. While it's in there, it's treated as tax-free earnings, right? You don't report any interest, dividends, or capital gains. And then when you take money out of Roth, what happens? You already have paid tax on your contribution, and any earnings coming out of Roth accounts are treated as tax-free. So we sort of think, well, tax-free, I don't need a spreadsheet to prove to me that tax-free is a good thing, right? Because if I did traditional, when I take the money out, I have not paid tax on my contribution, and earnings coming out of traditional accounts are taxable. But I'm always slowing people down on this because I know that if I put money in traditional, I get a benefit right now. And if we're all trying to squeeze every dollar because we don't know if we're losing our job or not, I don't want to necessarily be paying taxes right now. I'd rather get a big refund next year because my money's going into traditional. And with the Roth, if I pay these taxes now, when do I really get that benefit? It's not tomorrow. It's not next year. It's when I've taken enough tax-free withdrawals out to offset all the taxes I've already paid and what that would have grown to. I mean, I can come up with examples where if I don't have to pay the tax on my contribution, it can save me so much money. I can now invest in an IRA. So be careful with being able to do something, being confused with, oh yeah, I should do that. We're not always recommending contributing to Roth thrift because we're kind of being forced to make a deal with the devil of tax law future. Know what I mean by that? What if they change the tax laws? What if I don't live long enough to get all this tax-free income? What if I move to Florida and I'm in a lower tax bracket and I paid the taxes in a higher tax bracket? Or what if I live a really long time and become frail? My clients that have lived a really long time and have become frail spend many years in zero tax brackets because we deduct the cost of their care. And that takes all the fun out of paying more in taxes now when I end up in a low or zero tax bracket in the future. So there's just a little caution flag waving here. It doesn't mean people are doing Roth contributions or making mistakes, but it does mean slow it down a little bit. Can you really afford to pay these taxes? Or do you really know you're going to get a benefit from paying the taxes on your contribution to your Roth thrift?
Karen, I know this is off script, but that was so good. Oh my gosh. You don't know how many arguments I have with people about it's not automatic.
I'm
That's
high-fiving
a
Michelle.
perfect thing. I have a little bell that I have next to my desk, like, yay.
Yeah, ring the
But
bell.
I did have a quick question because if
Sure.
people do the conversion, could you talk about that may not also be the best thing?
Right.
Because if that money's going to come from the withdrawal from that account, does that make sense, right? Because you have to find
gotta
the money to pay
so
the taxes. So
right.
I
So
know I'm
let
off
me
script,
back it
Erin.
up.
I'm sorry, but she was just, I
No,
love
you
what she
jump
did.
in anytime. So, but what she's talking about is, we're going to be able to do conversions, and let's just make sure everybody knows what that means. It is not a religious experience, right? When I'm doing a conversion in tax law, I am doing something very specific. I'm changing a traditional account into a Roth account. And at that moment, it triggers a taxable event on anything that hasn't been taxed yet. So I'm a huge fan of converting an account that hasn't had any time to grow, right? I did my first individual retirement account contribution, and it was a traditional contribution, and the next day I converted it. right? I don't have to pay tax on anything. But I started investing in my individual retirement account in the 70s. I can convert it, but I will not live long enough for that to be a good idea because I'd have to pay all the taxes due in 1 year to get what? Tax-free treatment going forward. So Michelle makes a great point. Not only does it defies a little bit of common sense to want to pay these taxes up front when we don't know what tax laws are going to be or tax brackets are going to be or how long we're going to live, but you also have to have the money, right? If I do this conversion and I owe $25,000 in tax, a lot of people don't have $25,000 hanging around. So then you have to take it out of the account and you have even less money going forward. So that's what I mean when I say, just because I can do something doesn't mean I will do something. It's good to know what the rules are. Now you're going to have to, if you're over 50, doing those extra catch-up provisions, you're going to have to prepare for a little higher tax bill the following year, because up until now, if it was going in traditional, it won't be allowed to. So you're losing a little bit of a tax deduction there. All right. So we can probably do the next slide, Tammy.
Okay.
Yeah. So the other topic about thrift that I know you're going to be asking questions about, and maybe Caitlin and Brandon have already answered this, but you are able to borrow against your thrift savings plan. And let me just put my card on the table face up here. Be really careful. It's a bad idea, because what happens when you borrow from your thrift savings plan, it's not that it's an expensive interest rate or an expensive loan origination fee. It's that we right now are not even sure we're going to be employed in the next few months or by the end of the year. And when you separate from service, if you don't immediately make some provisions to get that loan paid back, guess what's going to happen? You'll be in default. And when you're in default of a loan, the outstanding balance, the part you didn't pay back, is considered taxable income. So let's say, and I've talked to people about this. I did a presentation yesterday and somebody said, I'm thinking I might want to take a loan against my thrift plan because I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills if my job disappears. It's not going to be a great idea, because if his job disappears, let's say he took a $20,000 loan, right? And he paid his bills and he gets separated from service 3 months later. You know, the $20,000 is gone and he has to make payments on that. Well, he doesn't have the money, and now he'll pay tax on the $20,000 that he borrowed. What about a few years ago, I took $20,000 out to help buy part of my car, and I've only paid $5,000 back. And I maybe not be paying all that much attention to it, because when I take a loan against thrift, the payment comes automatically out of my paycheck. I didn't have to authorize them to do that. I didn't have to do the math to figure out how much. I just said over what length of time, right? So I kind of forget, there's a lot going on, that I've got still $15,000 of this car loan outstanding. I separate from service. I'm looking for another job. I don't remember that I still have that $15,000 loan, but now no payments are being made because you don't have a paycheck. And you're going to get a 1099 next year saying you had another $15,000 of income. No, you didn't. Well, yeah, that's what a default loan really is. So the loans against your thrift savings plan are not going to be the solutions to how are we going to get through these uncertain times. They never were a good idea, right? Even if we don't worry about, or we survive and we're happy about not losing our job. Thrift savings plans loans were always a bad idea. And if you go to the next slide, I think I have an example on why, right? In my example, I'm borrowing $5,000. That's nothing compared to what your thrift savings plan is likely to be worth, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not even more, after a lifetime, right? And I'm getting a payback in 5 years, which is nothing. Many of you are going to have a thrift savings plan for 5 decades. And I'm paying it back at a 2% interest. The interest is set in the month you take out the loan. And guess where the interest goes? Into my pocket. So a lot of people look at that and say, what's the big deal? It sounds like a free loan. Nothing could be further from the truth, because what's really happening is that I'm not earning what the stocks earn, right? If I'm not spending my money anytime soon, I go for growth because I might live to be 100. I don't want to run out of money. I can afford the volatility of the stocks because I'm not selling. And when I'm contributing, I'm actually buying at a great price. So look what happened in my little example, little no nothing loan over a short period of time. 30 years in the future, I have 16,000 fewer dollars than if I had never taken this loan, or I had taken the loan from the credit union or the bank and paid them a few $100s worth of interest and gotten it behind me. So they're just not going to be the solution. All right.
Yeah, what
So
are
on our
other
next slide,
options, Karen, as far
yep,
as that goes? Because I've been getting that question from a lot of people, like, should I take a loan out because I really
yep,
didn't have the cash on hand? If it
I
takes
know,
6 months to process my retirement, 6 months to find another job, I need something to bridge that time. I guess it
right.
could be a last resort unless there's something else.
Not, I would, instead of taking a loan out of the thrift savings plan, I would actually retire and then see if I was eligible for a distribution. But I would be exhausting all kinds of other possibilities. Like, what about a personal loan? Why take it from your thrift savings plan? Why not go to the bank or the credit union and say I need a hardship loan and just pay it back without this um, potential penalty. And we are going to get through this.
Right.
It's not going to be tonight. It's not going to be tomorrow, but we're going to survive this. We're resilient, and we're giving ourselves tools to be resilient and make smart decisions. It is so expensive. You pay for the rest of your life on a decision to take this money out of thrift that we're going to exhaust every other possibility.
Got it.
When you do take money out of your thrift savings plan, it's actually pretty easy. And the reason I want to bring this up is because some of you have colleagues who who retired maybe 10 years ago and just made it very clear, you got to move your thrift savings plan because it is impossible to get money out of it. And they were kind of right. It was kind of a pain in the neck to get money out of a thrift savings plan back in the day. But with the Thrift Modernization Act of 2017 fully implemented a little ahead of schedule in 2019, it's just like getting money out of any financial institution. You give them, you tell them you need your money, and within 3 to 5 business days, maybe 10, you're getting money wired or you're getting a check issued to you. And that's about as good as it gets in the investment world. So you can kind of wait till you really, really, really need the money and then just request it. And that's called a partial withdrawal. You'll tell them how much money you want, right? And some of you will know patterns are developing. You want to at least this much every month or every quarter, or maybe just once a year, right? You can set up something called a scheduled payment, and you can start and stop them anytime you want. The old days, you could take one partial withdrawal in your lifetime, basically, in your retirement. And if you could only take a monthly withdrawal, and if you realized in February you didn't ask for enough or you asked for too much, too bad. Get it right next time. Now it's much easier, much more sane. You need a little more, you ask for a little more, you don't need it, you got another job, you don't take it anymore, and you mix and match. So we usually take the smallest scheduled payment that we can get by with, because we all know if money comes in, we'll find ways to spend the money. And then when we really need money, then we ask for a little top off with a partial distribution there. The single payment is just thrift speak for close the account. And I hope it doesn't come to that for anybody anytime soon. But the reason I always mention it is because it confuses some people. We're going to talk about, should you move the money to an IRA? And there are ways to get money to individual retirement accounts without it being a taxable event. So, and you got 60 days. in one of these methods to get your money to an IRA without it being taxable. So I've met people, sadly, who have said, yeah, I'll take the whole thing. Give me the single payment. I want the whole thing. And then thinking they have 60 days to get it into an individual retirement account, and they don't. The IRS is notified that you closed an account. And when you close an account, that's traditional money, what happens? Triggers the taxable event. So just be thoughtful about, we're just working with the top 3 bullets there, right? The annuity option is the option that I actually have never recommended. And I have spent my entire career trying to come up with a reasonable hypothetical so that if you look like this person I'm describing, you might sort of kind of maybe want to consider an annuity option. And the reason I can't come up with an example is because you're going to be forced to make an irrevocable election. And we're all human beings. We know life arrives unannounced. Good news, bad news always involves time and money. So we have to stay more flexible. And those of you who are going to be eligible for a pension, your pension is so much better than this annuity option. I can't come up with a reason to have both. So we're not going to, an annuity by definition just means what? Stream of monthly payments. But what the problem is, if I annuitize, if I say to the Thrift Board, give some of my money to the insurance company that has this contract in exchange for a stream of monthly payments, and I get a payment and I die, who gets the rest of the money? The insurance company. Well, nobody likes the sound of that. So I ask for an annuity with at least 10 years of benefit. And if I die after one payment, my beneficiary is going to get the remaining payments. And the insurance company will do that, but it starts me off at a smaller dollar amount. I want inflation protection, smaller dollar amount. I want survivor benefit for a spouse or special needs child, smaller, smaller, keep going, smaller. So you're better off controlling your destiny here than making an irrevocable election when, wait a minute, this is the most uncertain times that most of us have lived through. This is not when we want to lock in. So we're probably not doing the annuity. The next slide, Kim.
Yeah, one tip I would give folks when they leave federal service, especially if you're not planning to use any of this money right away, make sure you put your banking information into the TSP in your account. Once you've retired, once you've left the government, put the banking information in there, because if there does come a day when you need money right away, they're going to hold that for a week until they make sure that's your bank. So if you have that already in there, they'll already have vetted it. And then when the time comes, like you said, 2 to 3 days, you'll have your money. Otherwise,
when I do this training at the Thrift Board, I always ask, what's the most important thing I can tell the hundreds, if not thousands, of federal government employees we're talking to every week now? And they always say the same thing: be sure you keep your contact information current with the Thrift Board
and OPM.
when you separate from service. And I thought, well, why the heck wouldn't you keep your bank routing information current or your snail mail address current? And it's because while you're working, your agency is doing that for you. And when you're not working, you're your own agency, right? You have to do that. So the Thrift Board knows when you're retired and how old you are, and they can do they can make sure that you get your required minimum distribution, which is required when you reach a certain age and have separated, and failure to take it is a 25% penalty. So the Thrift Board is all set up to help you avoid a penalty, but if they can't find you, right? I
can tell you a lot of horror stories about that very situation. So yes, listen carefully to that advice.
Before you go off of TSP, Karen, can you again, I'm like so in awe of you right now. Like some of your explanations are just so brilliant. I've been hearing from a lot of people who are afraid of what's happening and think that there's something going to be happening to the TSP, so that they should move all of the money out because X might happen. Then I've also been hearing from people who now, some people who are probably unscrupulous, telling them that they should pull it out and put it into annuity. And
Yep.
you talked about the annuity within the TSP, but there are also
But
people
it's the same.
who are coming
It's
after government workers, trying to tell them to, especially those who have quite a bit of money in there, that to
yeah,
give them that money for an annuity. So those two things I
yeah,
wondered. I know you've got a lot
yeah.
more you got to still
No,
cover.
no, no.
Those
No,
are the questions that
absolutely.
I'm getting almost daily, honestly.
Yeah, so I'm getting that as well. I have to move my money to an IRA because the federal government's just going to be using it and it'll just disappear. And that's just fear. That is not reality at all. There are reasons to move money from any employer-sponsored plan to an IRA, but they have to apply to you. And I also can't, the annuities are easy to sell because they're sold on fear. And they've usually got high fees, high commissions. And when you're in it, before you annuitize, you might realize, oh my gosh, these fees are like 2% a year. I just left 0.04% a year. This is cray cray. You can't get out of it because most annuities have what's called a back end surrender charge. So we got to ride it out until over time, the fee to get out has been minimized. So if anybody is explaining to you, you have to do this, you have to do this right now, there is no urgency to move your thrift savings plan. But when you do move it, if it will be because there are some advantages to all about me, individual retirement accounts over employer-sponsored plans. Now, this particular slide is sort of hinting at it's highlighting one of the reasons some people are going to move their money to an IRA when they're getting ready to spend down thrift money, because when you take a withdrawal out of your thrift plan, it comes out prorated. And what that means is if I had 50% of my money in the G fund and 50% of my money in the C fund, I've got cash and I've got stocks, and the stock market is down, right? I would prefer to take all the money out of cash, but the thrift savings plan only allows it to come out 50-50, prorated on my positions. In an IRA, you would be able to target it. If you call or contact your IRA custodian, your financial institution, and say, hey, I want to take out this much money, they're not going to process that until you tell them, well, so like, where are we taking it from? And when I can target withdrawals, I can make money last longer. I can more confidently stay invested for growth because I know I've got all the money I'm going to need in the short term just sitting in cash. So that's a legitimate reason that somebody is going to say, I might want to consider an IRA. And somebody else is going to go, that's not me. I am not going to be looking at where the market is and making decisions. I'm going to just leave my thrift alone until I know it can just sit there in the G fund and I'll just spend it without worrying about where the market is, or I'll be in that L income fund that is mostly in the G fund. And the next slide there, what do we have? Yeah, so the whole list of what might make sense for some people to consider. None of this is fear, all right? Nobody is saying you got to do this right now and you got to lock it into something that's going to give you a guarantee. Some people will want more investment choices. Your thrift savings plan is brilliant for accumulating money, but it doesn't have a great bond fund. If you noticed, even in those life cycle funds, they're barely using that bond fund. None of them use it for more than 5 or 7%. And when you go to how to build a portfolio school, you learn when somebody wants regular income, look for some bonds, because what do the bonds do? They pay regular income. So some of you might want a more balanced approach to investing. And in an IRA, you can invest in anything. You can invest in Bitcoin. I'm not recommending that. You can invest in your favorite company that you're keeping an eye on now that you're fully retired and you got time to look at this stuff. Or you can invest in exactly the same things you had in your thrift savings plan. So for some people, more investment choice is important. And for other people, I'm not there. I mentioned already the targeted versus the prorated withdrawals. There's an advantage for non-spouse beneficiaries. And again, this may not be a big deal for you, but a non-spouse, let's say I'm the federal government employee and I've got a thrift savings plan and I've named my husband as my beneficiary, my husband Rick, and then the kids, right? So I die, my husband Rick is my beneficiary. And he can continue to have his account with Thrift. He can participate in the Thrift plan. He can take those targeted withdrawals, or he can take, not targeted withdrawals, those scheduled withdrawals, and he can take the partial withdrawal when he wants to. He can do whatever he wants, right? But Rick is going to die moments later brokenhearted. Tammy knows him. It's true, right? And so now, who's the beneficiary? Non-spouses, the kids. And the money gets paid out. And we've seen it pay out pretty quickly with no chance to do any kind of tax planning and no chance to do, and no opportunity to get a little bit more tax benefit before we have to close out the account. If I moved money to an IRA, let's change the story. I'm alive. It's a miracle. And I still die. But Rick, somehow in his grief, moves the thrift savings plan that he just inherited from me into an individual retirement account. And then he dies moments later, brokenhearted. Then what happens, right? The kids have 10 years to take the money out of that IRA. So they get to strategize a little bit. So sometimes we recommend, oh, let's get it out. You're in your lowest tax bracket ever. You're in grad school and not earning any money. Or sometimes it's the exact opposite. You're earning professional income. We're going to take it a little bit evenly over the 10 years and everything in between. Lots of time. Sometimes we've actually said the plan is let's let it go for 10 years and then take it all out in a year where we couple this big taxable event with a big tax deductible donation in honor of mom and dad who left us this money, right? So lots of planning opportunities there. Some of you may think, yeah, but that's not me, right? Or I don't have that much money in my thrift plan. I'm going to need to spend it anyway. The last thing in the world I'm worried about is taxes for my beneficiary. I can also allocate my Roth money separately from my traditional money. If you think about that, you're going to remember how traditional money, when you take a withdrawal out of a traditional retirement account, you pay tax on it. But when you take a withdrawal out of a Roth account, you don't pay tax on it. Well, that's going to give us some planning opportunities. And it might indicate that, oh, I'm going to be spending more from this one because I'm in this tax bracket or that tax bracket. And it'll allow me to leave some money invested longer if I can separate those accounts. You can't do that. I don't know why. Tammy doesn't know why either. Why we can't invest our Roth or our thrift in our Roth money differently from our traditional money in thrift. And then there's one kind of cool thing that more and more people are aware of and more people are using. When you get to required minimum distribution age. It used to be when you no later than April 1st, year following the year in which you turned 70 and a half. And now it's starting to be 73. It'll be 75 based on the year that you were born. If you're born in 1960 or later, you don't have to worry about required minimum distributions until you're retired and hitting 75. But when they're required and they'll be required for the rest of your life. If you give any money at all to charity, and most of you do, you can send the money directly from an IRA to your favorite charity, and whatever you send to the charity is not it counts against your required minimum distribution, but you didn't have to pay tax on it. It's a pretty cool thing. It doesn't exist from employer-sponsored plans, all right? So some people are going to wait and wait this out a little bit, but just note to self, the older you get, the more you want to revisit, should I be moving this money to an IRA? And these are basically the advantages. The disadvantage, of course, on the next slide is that IRAs can...
Before you move on, can I ask you one question?
You can ask two questions.
Okay. The question I have is, let's say I give $1,000 a month to my church. So I want to take out 10,000 of my TSP account so I can give that $1,000 a year to my church. Well, if I do that, I'm still going to have to take the required distributions all out of the TSP because those are two separate accounts, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I didn't want
Correct.
someone to
But
think that I can move that and then not have to take RMDs from the thrift. I still have to do that.
correct. There's just moving, the thrift has the same RMD rules as any other retirement account does, right? So when you hit that age, your RMD will have to come out of thrift, and you'll pay tax on it, and then you'll give money to your favorite charity. It's
Yeah.
just a smarter way to do it, to be charitably inclined through individual retirement accounts.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's an interesting concept, though. I like that one.
Yeah, it's and it's been around actually for a while. It's just more and more people are doing it. It's, the first time I might suggest it to a client, they go, uh-huh, whatever. And they say, no, really, let me, the next year, you didn't ask us to help you with that. And then they realize, oh my gosh, yeah, that makes sense. The caution flag I always have is that IRAs can be more expensive. They don't have to be. I can come up with examples where IRAs can actually be less expensive than the Thrift Board, which is considered pretty darn cost effective. The problem is when you involve an advisor, there are some advisors out there that are just, let's put them in air quotes, right? They are selling inappropriate, heavily loaded with commission and fees kind of product, or they're just charging kind of greedy fees. There is no need for you, there's no requirement for you to have an advisor to move money to an IRA. I know a lot of people will feel more comfortable learning about it and maybe getting started with an advisor, and or the older we get, right? I'm on my game, but the odds of me being on my game for every financial decision all the days of my life are, I don't like to think about this, but yeah, not much more than, a very small number. So I might want to be working with an advisor that knows me and that I know, so that as I get older, I can be offloading a little responsibility about that. So just be careful about when you're picking advisors, and the CFP Board website is very good about giving you lots of tools for that. And the other thing about this that I think is just interesting is that if I'll leave as little as $200 in my thrift account, I always have an option to go back to thrift. If I take all the money and put it anywhere, spend it all, put it in an IRA or some combination of those things, right? The thrift door slams. But if I just keep a little bit of money there, I can go back. Now, I used to say that's probably worth doing because all of the improvements the thrift board has made over time, where it was worth having that door open a little bit, I thought. But I must say, done correctly, you're not going to need to go back, right? So my better advice is just slow down and be making sure that these advantages to IRAs are advantages to you, that you have the time to think it through. You might put this off for a couple of years and then revisit it, right? Because those advantages of IRAs are important to you, and you're not really leaving behind anything when you leave the thrift board. Those choices are all available in most every IRA. All
Good.
right. Next slide. Let's see how we're doing. Oh, I did need to talk to you. I know everybody's worried about this. So I have a couple thoughts on the, financial planners always talk about the appropriate use of debt. Debt is not the devil necessarily, but we do get a little carried away or a little too casual with debt. And it has been by far the number one reason over my 40 plus years of giving advice to federal government employees that I've had to say to somebody, you can't retire. Tammy just told them they could retire. They had their MRA, they were eligible.
No,
And
I
then I
told them
come
to
in
go
on,
see Karen because I knew
yeah.
they couldn't retire.
and it's such a painful part of having of our careers, of having to give advice that people don't really want. So on the next slide, I'm just really, you can't rely on debt is really what it comes down to. Debt can be strategic, debt can be a tool, but when you start out in life, you probably do have to rely on debt. A lot of people needed a car loan to buy the first safe car, needed some student loans to get a shot at a decent education. I don't know anybody who paid cash for the first house. That's just not the circle I've been traveling in, right? But over time, we all have to hold ourselves to the standard of anticipating when we're going to need money and saving in anticipation of that. So my second car, maybe I have a better down payment than the first car. By the time I'm at a mid-career stage of life, I've noticed I outlive my vehicles, even though I'm maintaining it well and driving it for like forever. I'm going to just hold on to this so that I could pay cash. And then when I'm looking around for car loans, if there's a low interest rate, I can be strategic. I can say, you know what, I can borrow money at a low level and put more, I can do that catch-up provision in my thrift savings plan, or I can do an IRA in addition to what I just did in my thrift savings plan, because I saved money for a car and it's really cheap to borrow right now. And then when right then, right, it had been cheap. Now, if I was buying a car, I might say, you know what, I'm not sure I want any of your money because interest rates, as we all noticed, crept up. So I don't want people always focusing on, I got to get that mortgage paid off no matter what. I don't mind people doing that. But if it means their plan isn't going to be flexible or they're not putting money in their thrift savings plan, we're going to need to talk about the appropriate use of debt. On the next slide, if you currently have any of these loans and you're going into uncertainty, I need you to be proactive, right? It's not going to get, just because it's messy and painful and sometimes embarrassing to look at how unprepared you are to go without a paycheck for a while, ignoring it, woe is meing it is just going to make it worse. So if you have credit card balances, just remember, they don't want you to default. Contact every single one of them and say, I'm a federal government employee, just lost my job, or I may lose my job in the next 30 days. I need this interest rate lowered. I need to talk to somebody here for some kind of benefit. And I'm hearing people getting them. Nobody's coming to you saying, hey, I got a great idea. I bet you're struggling right now. Let me take a little burden off your shoulders. That's not the way it works. So you proactively look at it. I don't know what to tell you about your education loans right now. Let's do that next week, because didn't something with Department of Education get announced today that I haven't processed yet? That's complicated, but do have all the details on it. If you went to a financial planner and you had all the details of your various loans, a financial planner would be able to help you understand what your priorities are. Very often when I say, what do you owe? Most people can't tell me. Forget the interest rate or the term or whether they qualified for an income-based payment. So do a little homework there, and then you'll get great advice. Auto loans, we can kind of talk about. A home equity line of credit can be the worst or the best loan, and it really depends on you. Are you a person who lives within your means? It's a yes or no, right? Think about the last time you had an unplanned expense, right? An unplanned dental bill, or a friend had tickets to a playoff game, and who thought the Commanders and the Lions would make it to the playoffs? This is once in a lifetime. You're going, right? So how'd you handle that? Did you just kind of tighten your belt a little bit, or is that still on a credit card? And now you also had something with the car happen, and that's on the credit card. Some people intuitively, I'm convinced there's going to be research that shows which gene many people didn't get, and that some people do. You just intuitively know how to live within your means. Some people are surrounded by good example, and they learn it by effortlessly, by osmosis, and some people learn it the hard way. If you don't know, if you haven't demonstrated this, you have the skill set of living within your means, always saving a little bit for who knows what could happen, we don't talk to you about home equity lines of credit. But the other part of this is, are you employable? If your job disappears, have you been looking? Do you know what's your network? What's your skill set? Because people who are quite employable, or people who have partners who are not losing their jobs, and you've got a little grace period here, it might make sense to use a little home equity line of credit because they're cheap, right? It doesn't cost me anything to get approved, and I'm in charge of how much this is going to cost me. I can borrow it out this month and 2 months later pay it back, and I'm done, only paid 2 months worth of interest. So there's flexibility on the repayments, but it's just not for everybody. And we've already talked about those thrift loans. If you've got one now and you might be losing your job, you're looking for how you're going to get that repaid. And go to the Thrift website. There's good information on the Thrift website, but you don't want to default on that and then have to report it as taxable income. And then I think I just have one slide that we can put up here, and then I know I want to get to some questions. The other things that you can be doing is find another job. In the 70s, I grew up in Detroit, and you knew when the line was being shut down because everybody was looking for a little side hustle. That you'd usually get a little bit of notice that they were shutting down the line, and we didn't have credit cards with big limits on them. You had to get another job. I've been telling people, just back up and put everything in play. I know you don't want to move back home, but if there's a bed and somebody will let you sleep in it without charging you much, if any, rent, you want to move back home and rent out your place, because we've got to bring all the expenses in as much as possible. I've had people downsizing, renting out their house and downsizing. I've had people really I've had people have the heart-to-heart with their pseudo-adult children, but we can't pay for this. I'm working with a family right now where they didn't save enough for college, and I said, that's fine. I can always get a kid through college without any parental or guardian money. Do that every year. I meet students, high school students, and you know what we focus on? Controlling the cost of the education. We do 3 hours on how to do that. So as a last resort, we might have to reduce what you're putting into thrift. If you're really kind of on a paycheck to paycheck and likely to lose your job and unlikely to have a skill set that the marketplace is going to jump on quickly, that would be the scenario where I'd say maybe for the next couple of months, we'll have to cut your thrift savings contribution down to 5% because we want to get that match. And all right. Why don't we leave this up? These are, Caitlin, I know you've been in the background curating some questions for people coming in, and Brandon's been answering them. Are you available to ask any questions, Kate?
There we go.
Did you
Sorry,
see-
I couldn't find my unmute for a
Yeah,
section
well,
there.
you've been busy.
I know. It's like there's a lot of buttons around here. I know we had some questions come in before. There's still a lot of questions in the chat right now.
Okay.
So I'm gonna just kind of start off with one that emailed, and then I promise I'll look over here to see what keeps popping up in the chat. But
Okay.
I think we had honed in on, can I take a monthly payment from TSP at my MRA, which is 57 for this person, 36 years of service, without penalty?
Because the age at which you can access money from your thrift savings plan without a penalty is 55. If it was in an IRA, you'd wait till 59 and a half. So that's good news for the way you asked the question, but there's another way to ask the question: should I take scheduled payments out of my thrift savings plan and at 57? And the answer is, well, probably not. But again, as a last resort. And maybe we would just take it for a year or so until we get back on our feet, because let's just be clear, I'm not meeting a lot of 57-year-olds who have saved enough money to be out of the workforce for decades. And when you take money out of thrift, I took $10,000 out when I was 50 years old, right? I would have only been able to buy $8,000 worth of stuff. But that $10,000, had I left it alone till my uh, required minimum distribution age, would have likely grown to 20 to 40 to maybe even $50,000. I bought $8,000 worth of goods, right? So yes, you can give you a little peace of mind there. But then I want you hearing me saying, I don't want to do that. It's only last resort.
And the other
Right.
thing people say to me, because I think they misunderstand that it's no penalty on the withdrawal, but they still got to pay tax on it.
That's a good point, because
Mhm.
taxes feel like penalties, but no,
Yeah, it's a double penalty.
yeah, it's a
Hey,
painful one. So
Tammy, if we're done with the slides, do you want to take down that's just so we can
there's
just-
actually one more slide
Oh,
that I want
okay,
people to
gotcha.
be able to see. And just leave it up so people can see this. There are other resources than just reviewing the recording of this and hoping you got it all. There are benefit specialists who are available, but they're booking up. And so I've put Tammy's company out there. She's got lots of great people that I rely on when I get a thorny question. Do look at what the CFP board has, look at Office of the OPM website, you'll find a lot, and NARF. Tammy, you can explain what kind of great resources they have.
Yeah, so if you're a member of the NARF organization, the National Active and Retired Federal Employees, you have a whole library of webinars that we've recorded. I'm all things on the table. I do work with NARF, but I think they are an excellent resource because we have financial planning webinars and estate planning and benefits planning things. So if you need more information on some of this stuff, we have that. We also answer questions. Michelle, who's answering questions tonight, is one of the folks who is on that email list, and she'll even call you back if you leave a phone message there. So they do provide excellent customer service and information on benefits, as well as, of course, advocacy in Congress trying to prevent some of these things from happening that are not above board. So we want to make sure everything stays the way it is and not get any worse.
Right. Great. Okay, Caitlin,
Mhm.
You want me to
Back
take
to
the
Back,
questions.
back to the
Yeah.
questions here as quickly as I can. There's a lot of questions and comments just about mortgages, actually. Should I
Oh.
borrow from my TSP to pay off the mortgage until I get a new job? How to manage the mortgage during these layoffs? And then
Yeah.
people asking about reverse mortgages.
Okay, so there's
and when to
two
tap
things.
into that.
Generally, yeah, you don't want to take money out of a thrift savings plan to pay off a mortgage, even though that's, oh, what a happy coincidence, a chunk of money, chunk of debt. It's very tempting to tie those together, but there are proactive steps you can take. If you know you're going to struggle with this mortgage payment, you want to be on the phone with your lender tomorrow, and you want to do a little Google research on what to do if I'm falling behind. We learned all of these steps during COVID, when a lot of people lost their jobs, and you can write a hardship letter to your mortgage holder, and they can give you a certain number of months or a certain period of time where just you don't have to make the payment and it's still in force.
Could I also recommend that
Yeah.
while they still exist, we don't know what's happening with them with HUD, but a HUD-approved housing counseling agency can help you with that conversation with your mortgager. If you just, not everybody feels comfortable calling, they don't know what to say, they're embarrassed. Definitely look for HUD-approved, so there'd be nonprofit
Good point.
financial agencies. And then also on the list, maybe we could add it, is the National, I always make sure I get it right, the National Foundation for Credit Counseling,
Yes, I
NFC,
use them.
nfcc.org. If you're in a
Mhm.
lot of debt trouble and you want to try to consolidate credit cards, things like that, I would go to them, nfcc.org.
Yep.
Be very careful. Make sure it's a nonprofit. Not one of those people that say, "Give me $2,000. I'm gonna help you get out of debt." That's not what I'm talking
No,
about.
that's not what you want
Avoid
at
those.
all.
Right.
Yeah, no, excellent point. I've had good success with them So there sometimes can be a low fee with a monthly fee to keep you on track, but you get your 29.99% interest down to single digit, and they get the late fees backed out, and it can really work. So there are resources is really the point. Reverse mortgages probably aren't going to be a good choice. They're very tempting for anybody over the age of 62. I'm over the age of 62. I can borrow money out of my house based on how much I have in it, how much of this I own and don't owe, and I never have to make a payment. I never have to pay it back until I move or die, right? Well, I like it here. I'll stay. And when I die, it wouldn't bother me, would it? Well, let's not be so cavalier. How would a lender make money if I don't have to make any payments? They're charging interest, and they charge interest not on just what I borrowed out, but on fees that are kind of front end loaded into this. So that if I borrowed $50,000, I'm paying interest perhaps on $65,000. And as much as I want to stay in my house, right? What if it doesn't make sense for me to stay here? Or what if it's too expensive, even though I've taken this reverse mortgage because I'm now widowed and there's only one Social Security check and little pension coming in. So I collect stories for a living, and I've got some really sad ones of reverse mortgages that got people into a lot of trouble. They defaulted on it. You've got to maintain your house. Well, if you don't have money to pay the taxes and the insurance, or the hurricane comes through again and you don't have hurricane insurance, you're losing the house. And so we're going to stay away from reverse mortgages. Bottom line.
Thank you. So we're,
Mhm.
after TSP loans, reverse mortgages, all these options, what about someone considering taking out a HELOC to pay down debt or other bills in case I lose my job? Is this
Yeah, so
good if I have equity?
it's only good if it's going to be short term and you can pay it back, right? I don't want anybody taking a home equity line of credit for more than what they absolutely know they can pay back in 2 years. How do you know you can pay it back in 2 years? You already have the money. We just don't want to take it out of thrift. And how do you know you can pay it back? Your cash flow is still going to be fine because you've got a partner who's working, or you're just going around the corner and going to be employed again. But if we're just hoping to get employed, or if we're so living paycheck to paycheck, there's no wiggle room with all the obligations we have, a home equity line of credit is just the beginning of the end of having a house. So we don't go there. So it's a rule of thumb, I guess, but it's if you can't pay, if you don't know for sure you can pay it back in 2 years, we're not going to take it.
Thank you.
Sure.
The Roth conversion was a hot topic in the chat. So can you just hit
Thank
on
you,
that again
Michelle.
for next year when you have the option to convert the traditional to a Roth? Would it be a good option to convert a large chunk of money if we have a large write-off on our taxes due to
Maybe.
a business loss?
Yeah, maybe, right? So it's always going to be, if I'm in a very low tax year, like I talk to people all the time who, are going back to school for a while, or going part-time while the kids are young, or if we find ourselves in an unusually low tax bracket, of course I'm going to look at, maybe this wouldn't be so painful, but it is unlikely that well, it would be naive to actually do it without having done your taxes first, right? Without having your pro forma taxes done. So and here's the money I'm going to owe in next year, because it really could be a huge misstep.
You've got a question for Tammy here.
Caitlin, before she goes there, because we
Yeah.
really need to hang there just a minute. You're hearing a lot of information from people, Roth, and you almost people feel like if they're not in the Roth, somehow they're doing something wrong. And none of your financial situation should only be leading with taxes. You have, and that's what Karen is trying to say. Look at
Yeah.
the entire situation before you make a decision only based on supposed
Right.
tax savings. Now, it may surprise some of you all. I write about financial. I don't have any Roth money because at the time that they introduced it, I couldn't. We have too much income, my husband and I. Now I could do it, and then my portfolio, my 401k didn't offer it until later. But in the early years of our marriage, we were saving to send our kids to college. We wanted to have a better tax situation. So it didn't make sense for us to have Roth money. We wanted that tax break now. Now that he's a retired federal government actually, but then we started earning enough that it just made more sense for us financially to get that tax break now. And because we did so well, we listened to people like Karen, we had financial planner, we're going to be in the same tax bracket. So there really wasn't an advantage for us because we've done so well. We're in the same tax bracket. So why front
There
load
you go.
taxes? So what she's saying, y'all, is that it might work with you, but stop listening to what you hear on the internet and Roth. It may be, but maybe not. And so right now,
Okay.
for a lot of you, that's probably not going to be your biggest worry right now. You guys got to make sure your money is straight because you just don't know. It used to be if you were a federal employee, you could trust that that job was going to be there. If you were doing your job, that you have employment pretty much for life if you were a good worker. That's not the case anymore. So I just please listen to what Karen said. When if you're listening later, go back and listen to what she said about a Roth. And some of the other advice that you're hearing, make sure it is appropriate for you where you are in your life. One size does not fit all when it comes to financial planning.
All right.
Everyone, thank you so much for this amazing presentation. Our panelists have really done an outstanding job. I want to just make sure that I can take a minute or two to just touch upon what's next for folks who have been listening and watching this important webinar. Last week, CFP Board partnered with the Foundation for Financial Planning on a webinar for CFP professionals to learn about how best to provide financial planning to you all. And after the webinar, we asked CFP professionals to indicate if they were willing to provide financial planning to federal government employees pro bono, which means at no cost, or at a reduced industry rate. And our call to CFP professionals to raise their hands has been overwhelming, indicating that so many people are anxious to help you. And we really hope that you'll take advantage of their services. We're in the process of compiling these names and contact information, and we are going to be emailing you a link to a list early next week. So please watch for that. And again, we hope you'll take advantage of their services and get the help that you might need. I want to thank our panelists here tonight, Michelle Singletary, Karen Schaefer, Tammy Flanagan, our three helpers behind the scene who have been furiously answering questions. I know they didn't get to all of them, but that's why we encourage you to go out and seek the help of a CFP professional or someone else that you trust on some of these things. We're so grateful to everyone, and we wish you all the best, and we hope that you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much.